views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Immediately upon entering the 2016 presidential race, Donald Trump made immigration restrictions a centerfold of his Make America Great Again slogan.
The U.S. has become a dumping ground for everybody else's problems. And these are the best and the finest. When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're not sending you. They're not sending you. They're sending people that have lots of problems, and they're bringing those problems with us. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
Since his administration took office in 2017, President Trump has declared a national emergency regarding illegal immigration, allowing him special powers to enforce border security. Roughly 300,000 undocumented immigrants have been arrested, and the president signed executive orders limiting travel from certain Muslim-majority countries. Welcome to Bronx Connections Election 2020 Local Lens. I'm Nora Thomas, reporter and anchor at WFUV. That's the NPR affiliate radio station based on the Rose Hill campus of Fordham University in the Bronx. This is the fourth episode of a five-part series covering issues in the 2020 presidential election that will impact the Bronx. It's a joint initiative between WFUV, BronxNet, and Norwood News. Here in the Bronx, more than a third of the borough's 1.4 million residents were born outside of the United States. The New York Comptroller's Office reports as of 2018, immigrants also make up nearly half of the workforce in the Bronx and 60% of self-employed entrepreneurs. While federal policies related to immigration and naturalization are always a hot-button issue in New York City, the economic devastation of the COVID-19 pandemic has shined a harsh light on how immigrants fall through safety nets designed to prevent financial ruin in times of crisis. Immigration advocates say immigrants have been left particularly vulnerable without access to unemployment benefits or federal stimulus money, which can substantially impact their ability to pay rent. In a recent interview with BronxNet's Darren Jaime, Jennifer Hernandez, the lead organizer at Make the Road New York, said undocumented residents are also more vulnerable to intimidation or fear of being deported.
I think especially for undocumented folks, there's a lot of fear of retaliation, right, when it comes to immigration status. And again, there's a lot of lack to access to various sort of programs that help you financially. And so it is extremely hard.
Make the Road is a grassroots community organization fighting to build power for immigrants in working class communities. In response to the pandemic, they're focused on securing government assistance for undocumented residents, canceling rent incurred since the outbreak, and reducing the number of people incarcerated to minimize the spread of COVID-19. Most of their advocacy has been at the local and state levels, but federal policy could play a substantial role in aiding immigrant households. President Trump's challenger, former Vice President Joe Biden, has said welcoming immigrants to American communities is a priority of his campaign. In a recent interview with Telemundo, Biden says he plans to halt deportations for the first 100 days of his presidency and restore the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, commonly referred to as DACA.
I'm going to reinstate it, and then they're going to be part of what I'm going to send to the United States Congress is a total immigration bill to provide a pathway to citizenship for undocumented people in the United States of America. It makes no sense for us not to do that. And they're part of the reason why we're growing. They're part of the reason why, look, you have 24 out of every 100 kids in grades in school today are Latino, Spanish speaking. It makes no sense, none whatsoever, for us to walk away and not provide for access, not provide for education, not provide for health care. Look what's going on. And so it's part of the strength of the country. It's not a weakness, it's a strength.
Biden's campaign page doesn't mention specific plans to give aid to immigrants ineligible for existing unemployment and stimulus benefits. Speaking with Arturo Lopez, the legal director of BronxWorks, a community organization working to improve the economic and social well-being of Bronx residents, many of the biggest hurdles for Bronx immigrants are much more mundane.
There's also a whole host of other issues that are much smaller, much more technical that the community is facing, that immigrants are facing, from things as simple as dramatically increased delays in the processing of applications for simple things like the renewal of legal permanent resident identification, what's usually called a green card or a work permit, or even the naturalization process for individuals who are here legally in status and are seeking to become citizens. Those applications are being um, taking much longer to process than they were before. So there's a lot of issues being faced by the immigrant community that are large as well as just small and technical that are causing a lot of delays and frustration.
Here's my interview with Arturo Lopez from BronxWorks. Thank you so much for joining me. Just right off the bat, can you tell us a little bit about BronxWorks, what you do there, and how long you've been working there?
BronxWorks has been serving the Bronx for about a little bit over 40 years now. And they have a variety of services, homeless shelters, benefits programs, um, eviction prevention, senior centers, actually probably more programs than I could name now. I've been with BronxWorks for about 9 years now. I started off as the immigration staff attorney, and was in that department for a while. And now I'm currently the director of legal services and oversee the legal programs, which include the immigration program, our eviction prevention program, and the crime victim services, which assist individuals who have been victims of crimes.
Why do you think immigration is particularly important for American voters this year?
I think there's been a lot of talk in the media, and that brings it to their attention. And it's an issue that's been going on for a while now that hasn't come to a final resolution. It started in the Obama administration, where they were trying to pass in immigration reform, sort of revamp the whole system. They were not able to implement that, and it's continued certainly with the current administration as they're sort of undoing some of the advances that the previous administration was able to enact for immigrants.
And I think a lot of people are familiar with DACA, or the
Yes.
legislation to help dreamers, but are there any other things that you're specifically referring to?
DACA is one. There's also the fact that we are accepting less refugees than we were before, that asylum seekers are not being allowed to remain in the U.S. while they apply for their asylum process. There's also a whole host of other issues that are much smaller, much more technical that the community is facing, that immigrants are facing, from things as simple as dramatically increased delays in the processing of applications for simple things like the renewal of legal permanent resident identification, what's usually called a green card or a work permit, or even the naturalization process for individuals who are here legally in status and are seeking to become citizens. Those applications are being taking much longer to process than they were before. So there's a lot of issues being faced by the immigrant community that are large as well as just small and technical that are causing a lot of delays and frustration.
To what extent are these problems and developments like things that were implemented by the Obama administration that were then changed in the Trump administration, and to what extent are they things that were sort of just the general way of doing things that have changed in this most recent administration?
The majority of new issues are direct results of policies and procedures that have been implemented by the new administration. The delays, those delays are new because they sort of cut the workforce and are just causing the process to be sort of dragged out longer. There are issues with DACA that are direct results from the efforts of the current administration to end DACA. And while it has not technically ended, there are, again, small procedural issues. The IDs used to be issued for 2 years. Now they're issued for only 1 year, which has sort of created this cycle wherein you apply for your ID, you receive it, and you're almost immediately afterwards applying for a new ID for the following year at the same price that used to be paid for an ID that would last 2 years, well over $500. And that amount of money is a significant amount of money for this community.
In your experience, are there any things particular to the Bronx that a lot of Bronx residents might be facing? Like, is there anything that's unique to this very obviously diverse borough, and the economic and just various factors at play here as opposed to other places in the country?
The most immediate issue that is or factor that's affecting the residents of the Bronx is these changes to the fee waiver request process. It was possible to request a waiver of the fees of the applications that individuals were submitting, and now the Bronx is an extremely impoverished community. As I said, BronxWorks has been there for over 40 years, putting forth efforts to help this community and overcome the struggles that they have. And to this community, a fee of $500, $600, $2,000 for an application that will result in some sort of, in some instances, something as simple as renewing your identification, even though you already have legal status, is a tremendous burden. And the fee waiver process has been restricted and been made much more difficult to receive approvals on, and it's causing us to sometimes submit applications 2 or 3 times in order to just get them accepted, to get that fee waiver granted. And then on top of that, then you're facing the normal processing times, which are dragging on well past 6 months to a year.
And these are all, for the most part, issues that are controlled by the executive branch. It's not necessarily that Congress has made a bunch of changes since the administration changed.
No, there's been no changes implemented by Congress. As I said, these are all either procedural changes or the results of executive orders implemented by the administration.
And I imagine Trump getting reelected would mean the continuation of a lot of these things. To your knowledge, has former Vice President Joe Biden spoken about any of these particular things that are substantially impacting the Bronx?
Well, I mean, he was part of the administration that initially implemented DACA, so while there's been no specific policy sort of published by his administration, we would believe that he would at least restore DACA fully. And he has stated in the past that he seeks to create a path for citizenship to these individuals. And we, again, during his administration, during, I should say, the Obama administration, which Biden was a part of, we did see a more streamlined administrative process with shorter wait times. So just analyzing that record, we would be hopeful that it would be a sort of better scenario for the community and for immigrants in general, resulting in a better process and more fair process.
From my understanding, it seems like the biggest difference between each candidate, it's sort of largely a matter of tone. It seems like the current president has associated immigration with issues of public safety, whereas on Biden's campaign page, he's talked about creating avenues for immigrants to become citizens. So I guess outside of the realm of simply like tangible policies, what kind of impacts do those varying tones have on people in the Bronx, to your knowledge?
I would say that the tones have a very deep impact on immigrants and the Bronx community specifically. Um, I know from the people I encounter daily, since the current administration took over, the tone has created a sense of fear, a sense of being targeted that we did not see uh, coming from the community during the prior administration. Um, and so we do believe that tone has directly resulted in those feelings in the community, and the tone that thus far at least um, the Biden campaign has put forth does not seem to result in an equal amount of fear in the community. Um, and when I say fear, it's people like anyone else, like yourself, like myself, who are parts of families, who are parts of the community, who work, who go to school, who are seeking to simply live their lives in a productive manner, and so when you see those people being impacted by the tone of the administration and living in fear when their actions are really nothing more than the normal actions of day-to-day family households, you can see that that's having a negative effect on them, and we're hoping that that will not be the tone of the next administration.
That makes sense. And it sounds like in that vein, like why is this something that Bronx voters, independent of whether or not they are an immigrant themselves or have immigrants in their family, why is this something that matters to everyone? Why should people think about immigration when they go to vote on election day?
Right. Well, I think there's the sort of very general answer that I would think we would all believe in that the country was made up of immigrants, and that we should be welcoming of immigrants. But also, I would say that the concept that the current policies are more effective on criminal immigration are not actually correct. So if you're from a standpoint where you believe that we should be harsh on crime, that we should protect communities, and that what we should focus on enforcement and criminals, really, again, the Obama administration, which Biden was a part of, was much more effective on law enforcement and removing criminals from the United States. They had the highest removal rate of any administration up to that point in history, and that is because they implemented procedures and policies which made it a priority to focus on law enforcement, individuals that actually had a criminal history, and not individuals who were simply working and living as part of a family. So I think, yes, immigration is something that everyone should have in mind, but really, whether you're looking for a administration that will focus on reuniting families, or an administration that will focus on law enforcement and arresting and removing criminals from the United States, thus far, it seems that the policies that the Biden campaign is associated with will affect both those outcomes, will achieve both those outcomes.
From my understanding, it seems like the current administration is focusing a lot of energy on securing the border and a lot of emphasis on militarizing the border and building a
Yes.
wall. Do you think that that's even a substantial part of immigrant experience in the United States? And that's not even just like the experience of people living in, like, from my understanding, which is extremely limited, like the majority of people immigrating to the United States aren't crossing the border per se. Do you
Right.
think that's, like, in terms of focusing federal efforts on issues related to immigration,
Hmm.
what is the impact of focusing so much on the border precisely?
I mean, focusing on the southern border and dedicating the vast majority of funds and personnel to the southern border really just signals that all the other methods of entering the United States, um, and individuals that are looking to access those points for criminal purposes will are those access points are more open and more available to them. You know, we have a northern border, we have shores, we have arriving airplanes, we have ships that are arriving. Um, so if your goal is to secure and secure our borders, um, really the focus should be on all of our borders, not highlighting the southern border, which really, from what I can see, is only creating a perception of that particular area, that particular community, and not actually resulting in actual change.
It sounds like you are basing your expectations of a hypothetical Biden presidency largely based on his association with the Obama administration. And it sounds like you aren't familiar with any like hyper specific immigration plans. Do you think in any way Biden is not being articulate enough? Do you think there's more he should be saying?
Well, I mean, I believe he has signaled his goals, and to achieve those goals, there would be specific um, policies that would need to be implemented. So, if he follows through, it seems that you know, providing support for dreamers and restoring DACA would the way to do that would be to reinstitute DACA, remove the procedural barriers, remove any challenges. Um, so yes, I would. He has not sort of published his specific plan, but he has signaled and spoken enough about his goals that I see policy changes that would result in benefits to the community.
What's something you would like or appreciate to hear from any candidate running for national office related to immigration and how it could impact the Bronx?
I would like to, first of all, hear the candidates speak about immigrants in a welcoming way, because I think that would signal the goal of truly helping the immigrants community and the Bronx community um, in particular. And so I would say that what people need to do is to listen to the way and the words that they actually use to speak about immigrants and the topic of immigration, and try to really pick up what the overall message is, what the attitude is, whether it's a positive view or a negative view.
Is there anything else you'd like to add related to things Bronx voters should consider when they head to the polls in November?
Um, I would just say that, as I said, they should try to really listen to the overall message and get a sense of whether the candidate they're voting for creates a sense of welcoming and inclusiveness to all communities, rather than excluding certain communities. And if you do that, I think you'll be able to really understand what their message is and what policies they'll eventually be implementing.
Listen up, Bronxites. Election Day is Tuesday, November 3rd. Are you safely hitting the polls for in-person voting? Or are you voting absentee by mailing in your ballot? New York offers absentee ballots by mail to voters who will be unable to vote in person for any reason. Absentee voting can be confusing, but it's safe and has become more common during coronavirus due to fears of crowding when voting at poll sites. How can you get an absentee ballot? Glad you asked. First, did you register to vote by October 9th? If so, you're eligible to request an absentee ballot no later than October 27th. You can request an absentee ballot online at nycabsentee.com or first download an application at elections.ny.gov. Then you can fill out that application and do one of the following. Email your application to apply4absentee@boe.nyc or fax to 212-487-5349. Or mail it to the Bronx Board of Elections office located at 1780 Grand Concourse on the 5th floor, Bronx, New York 10457. Or you can request your absentee ballot by calling 1-866-VOTE-NYC. That's 1-866-868-3692. Once you receive your absentee ballot, it's time to vote. According to the Board of Elections, your absentee may say official absentee military ballot in the top corner. But don't worry, this is the correct ballot, even if you're not serving in the military. In the primary elections, more than 500,000 ballots were rejected and discarded due to human error. So before you start filling in your ballot, make sure to keep the following in mind. Fill in your bubble selections with a blue or black ink pen only. Never mark any X's or check marks as opposed to filling these bubbles in. This can absolutely disqualify your ballot. Don't forget to sign and date the back of the ballot envelope and make sure that that signature matches your own. And finally, mail your absentee ballot before the deadline, November 3rd. You can also drop it off in person at an early voting poll site between October 24th and November 1st, at a poll site on Election Day, November 3rd by 9 p.m., or at the Bronx County Board of Elections office no later than November 3rd by 9 p.m. If you miss any of these guidelines, your ballot may be automatically discarded. So please stay informed, stay safe, and most importantly, make sure you mail your absentee ballot or wear a mask, remain 6 feet apart, and safely head out to the polls to have your vote count and your voice heard.
President Trump has repeatedly emphasized his commitment to America First policies that limit immigration to reduce crime and avoid job competition. His campaign page supports plans to implement a merit-based immigration system. Biden, on the other hand, says he plans to reform the current immigration system to allow more undocumented residents to become citizens. Join us next week for our final segment where WFUV reporter Elliot Chaparelli will discuss racial and economic inequality. Special thank you to Arturo Lopez from BronxWorks for joining us. Thanks also to Sheila Maloney from Norwood News, Luis Rebolledo and Michael Maxnabi and everyone else at BronxNet, and in addition to George Budarki and Robin Shannon at WFUV. To read, watch, and listen to more from Bronx Connections, go to norwoodnews.org, WFUVnews.org, or bronxnet.org. I'm Nora Thomas. Thanks for watching.